Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, Kids Edition, my favorite edition. I love kids comics. I love doing the kids show, and I love kids literature. So yeah, welcome. It's February 2024, and we've got a really good book this time. The book is K is in Trouble, and we are joined by the author, Gary Clement, right there. Actually, I forgot to ask you for the show. Is it Clement or is it Clement?
Yeah, no, you got it, Clement.
Clement, great.
You got it.
Fantastic. I go by instinct with that because we have a Clement Street in San Francisco, so that's the way my head would go. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. My first question is always the same with everybody that I talk to, because I think this kind of gets to sort of the center of things, and it's why comics, of all the ways you could express yourself, of all the choices you could make for telling a story. What is it about comics that appeals to you, that excites you, that thrills you?
So you start with the hardest question. That's a great question. I think it goes right back to my childhood, and my Bible growing up was Mad Magazine.
Nice.
And I lived, to sort of get each new issue. The artists in Mad Magazine were my heroes. Sergio Aragonés, Mark Drucker, Peter Paul Porges. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce that name. Those guys were my idols. I think somehow, I don't think I was able to articulate it when I was, 9 years old, but I think that in some little tiny part of my, child brain, I just thought I want to do that. That's for me, and it was it wasn't just the drawing part. It was the combination of drawing and telling, in Mad Magazine, very short stories, but it was, about writing and drawing, the simultaneous nature of comics, using words and images to tell stories. And yeah, that was kind of where that's just what I wanted to do. And I think, I got to it circuitously. Like, it took me a while to finally get to doing comics on my own, because I kind of went the art route. I ended up going to art school and thinking that I was going to be a painter and a printmaker, and but all the paintings and prints had like text. So I think, even when I was resisting it in some way, thinking that I was going to become this this kind of classic gallery artist, I was still making comics. And then I finally ended up making, I kind of drifted into illustrating, which also requires, if not text, like an interpretation of text. And, then just moved into doing comics. And here I am.
Nice.
Now, talking to you.
Yeah. Did you draw comics when you were a kid at all, or?
I did. I had, I think my parents, didn't keep anything because they thought, I should probably, get a real job and go to law school or something. But I drew comics. I drew in grade, I think it was grade 7. I started publishing my own little one-page newspaper called Teachers Anonymous. Why I came up with that name, I'm not entirely sure, but I really did, hate school. And so it was just filled with scurrilous stories about my teachers. And I, there were like sort of, reportage style articles that were illustrated. And then I drew a cartoon that I recall the title of it was Myrtle the Turtle Man. I don't really remember what he did, but whatever it is, it was, something, subversive. And I got in trouble for it. I mean, it was like, it was banned, this paper. I remember my homeroom teacher, Miss Schiffman, if you're listening, hello, found it and was not, impressed. with this production, even though it was, I thought it was pretty great for somebody my age to be producing, like, their
Yeah.
own paper. I had like a guy who would, I don't remember exactly, it was, very ancient technology, but he would actually make copies of it for me. Like, I would do sort of an original version, and somehow, I don't know if he used like carbon paper or a Gestetner or something to make copies so that it could be distributed.
I'm thinking of the, if you're the age that I think that you are, that might be like mimeographs or something, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I handed it off to him, and Marvin Newman, that was his name.
Yeah.
I think he became a dentist. Marvin, if you're listening, hello. Yeah, and he made copies, and we had a little. I didn't sell it. We just kind of distributed it, and it was this little, I don't know, like Samistat, underground publication. That that was sort of. I think that was my introduction to this world, and people liked it. Like, it was funny. It made people laugh, and it was naughty. I remember we had one teacher who used to give out lines. If you were misbehaving, you would get lines, and how they have those graphs, like, when, I don't know if they still do them, but charity drives used to have like a thermometer, like an old style mercury thermometer, and it would sort of accumulate as the funds, accumulated. It would go up, and I did that with the lines, so I would we were trying to reach 1 million lines, and yeah, that was not, this was not considered. It wasn't appreciated, by the faculty, which I guess was also like a sign of its success, right?
Yeah.
It hit the right targets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know if teachers assign lines any longer for punishment. And the only reason I think that is because they barely even teach cursive any longer in schools. Because who needs to know how to write by hand?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know I don't know where punishment technology is now. I don't know what's going on. Like, my kids are grown up too, so I don't really, and I don't think they were ever, like, I don't recall them getting anything like I got. I went to a private school. I think it was kind of like the Wild West. There weren't as many kind of eyes watching. There weren't as many regulations that they had to adhere to. So yeah, those were the bad old days.
I love it. Well, it also sounds like that was kind of a direct extension of you reading Mad Magazine. Doing sarcastic things about your teachers. That very much is Mad.
That was my inspiration. I mean, that's where it all came from. I quoted Mad Magazine in my bar mitzvah speech, which I don't think a lot of kids did. And no, it truly was, and I think it still is. It's like a touchstone for me. I still have all my old magazines from way back when. I won't tell you what decade, but an early, 20th century publications, and I still look at them every now and then. I also have the books, like they used to. I don't know if they continue doing that, but they used to publish paperback versions of kind of like the best of. And I look at them probably, monthly anyways. I'll just take a peek and just kind of look at something. I used to use them when I was younger for reference, and I used to redraw them when I was a kid. I used to sit and, try to slavishly copy Mort Drucker, because to me, that he was just like the most inhumanly good drawing. I thought, there's like, how does he even do that? And it was a miracle to me that he could do that.
I very much agree. Unfortunately, most Mad stuff is not in print at this point. They're not keeping any of it in print, which seems so strange to me. And the magazine itself is not new comics any. Well, there's a little tiny bit of new comics, but it's mostly reprint, which is
okay.
Yeah, it's kind of.
They were doing that. Like, I remember when they went out of, when they stopped publishing a couple of years ago, and I do work for a newspaper up here, and I did a full page tribute to Mad Magazine, which interestingly was the most, like, what's the word I'm looking for, when it went viral. on social media. It had hundreds of thousands of hits, and I think it hit a nerve for a lot of people because it meant a lot. I think, if you're growing up when I was growing up in the '60s and '70s, Mad Magazine was sort of was my access point for being critical. It was sort of pre-National Lampoon, and it was clearly subversive, and it also gave me access to things that I actually couldn't do. Like, I couldn't see a lot of the movies that they were making parodies of because they were restricted.
Right.
It wasn't 18 yet. I couldn't see these movies, but I had Mad Magazine, which was to me just as good. Like, sometimes the movies were a little disappointing after I ended up seeing them. And they didn't measure up to the Mad version.
Yeah. There was definitely a meaningful percentage of Mad that went absolutely over my head as a kid, but even the stuff that I didn't understand, I always loved it there, because there was, as you say, something subversive, some sort of like, ooh, I really shouldn't be looking at this, but not in a it's actually dirty way, but just in a
it was Well, I still remember, and I agree. Same thing. If I was 8 or 9 years old, and there was stuff about Richard Nixon, and first of all, I'm Canadian. Second of all, I'm a kid, so I'm kind of like, I know that he's in the news. I kind of know who he is. I was interested in politics as much as any 10-year-old was, but I remember I had a poster on my bedroom wall that said Nixon. Was a picture of Richard Nixon, and it said Nixon was the one in '68. He'll be a bigger one in '72. And I just thought that was hilarious. And I had a much older cousin. He was like, 20 years older than me. And he came into my bedroom, and of course, I didn't really understand the difference between conservative and liberal. This was all, kind of meaningless to me. But I realize now, was conservative, and he saw that poster, and he exploded with rage. Like, how could you have that up on your wall? And you must take that down. And I thought, oh, this is, wow. Because to me, it was just funny. I thought it was pretty funny. I was a kid, and I knew, like we said, I knew there was something like subversive about it, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was.
Yeah.
But that's what I liked about it, and it, it hit. I mean, he was mad, and he wanted me to take it down. Yeah, I did. By the way, I just.
I understand.
Yeah.
So you went to school for like fine art. How long did that last? Your thought that I'm doing fine art?
Well, it still is happening. Like, I still make fine art. you can see behind me. This was not like a setup. This is just where my computer is. So, it's my little studio. I still paint. I'm shown a gallery in Toronto. But I think that the nature of the work has somehow synced with the comic work, so that the paintings have, for the most part, kind of, even if there's no text, there's still kind of a little bit of comic related, saying the same way like Philip Guston. Not that I'm comparing myself to Philip Guston, but he kind of sourced comics and that kind of imagery in his paintings, and then Basquiat does the same thing. So I those are also like kind of people that I refer to and think about a lot in painting, and I do it because I love doing it. So I've never really stopped doing that.
Yeah.
It's just it's not a reliable income stream. I just do it because I love doing it, and when I stop doing everything else, which is probably never, I'll keep doing that. I think that's just kind of what it's kind of like a muscle that just keeps, I'm not a doctor, but I think there must be a muscle that just keeps moving, even though you can't, you have no control over it. I just paint and I draw.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Is K the first comic that you did versus, say, an illustrated children's book or something like that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the first graphic novel. It's I've been doing picture books for about the last 25 years, mostly in Canada, mostly for a small, excellent publisher called Grandwood.
Mhm.
I've done a couple of books in the States. Simon Schuster did a Simon Schuster book years ago, and yeah, but I mean, this is the first time that I've done a graphic novel. I've been thinking about it for years and years and years, and my notes for K go back at least 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, when I didn't actually realize that until fairly recently, and I started looking through some notes for some reason, and I found very old sketchbooks, and I thought, wow, I've been thinking about this for a while.
Did you always think of it as a comic, or at some point were you thinking it might be an illustrated children's book?
I really didn't know. I mean, that's the honest answer. I had no idea what it was, and I ended up going to the Center for Cartoon Studies.
Yeah.
In Vermont, which you're obviously familiar with. I got a short, like a grant to go there for a week's kind of, I don't know what they call it, workshop residency, and I went there on the strength of the notes that I had made about K, and I just worked for a week there, and I still didn't know exactly what it was, but I came up with the first story in this book in that week, and I still didn't know what I had, because what I presented was kind of like a 60-page picture book, which is unheard of. I mean, normally the format is 32 pages. And,
sure.
I had this beast. I really didn't know what it was. I thought it was also finished. Like, I thought that I was done. And I remember the people who had sponsored the week came out in the last day, and there were 10 of us, I think, and we each presented individually whatever we had come up with in that week to these two people they were from PJ Library, which I can get into after if you're interested. But and I read it to them, and they were really, this was great. We loved it. And one of the women said, "Yeah, really good beginning." And I'm like, "Beginning? Like, what do you mean? That's it? Like, there's no more?" And she said, "No, this is the start of a graphic novel." And I resisted for a while, and I ended up getting an agent who I showed it to, who basically said the same thing. And I argued, like, no, this is a book, this is a graphic novel, or something like that. And she said, no, it's too short. It's too short, and it's too long to be a picture book. It's, you really have to figure that out. Like, either make it into a picture book, or go back to work and write more stories. And that's what I ended up doing. Because she said no one's going to publish a 60-page picture book, and no one's going to publish a 60-page graphic novel. So I had to make a choice. And I thought about it for a while, and I think it's a graphic novel. I think there's enough here to work with, and I went back for another year and a half, and worked on that. So that's the long answer. I wasn't sure until I had it.
Yeah. The original, let's just say 60-pager. Was it formatted like a comic? In other words, multiple things per page, or was it illustrated style, word picture, word picture, word picture?
Exactly. It was formatted. I made a PDF that I sent to this agent, and it was large panel. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a spread, like and text. And she also said, this agent, who was fantastic, Judy Hansen, she said, you have to format it. She was the one that said, don't change any of the content, but you need to reformat it into like a graphic novel format. And then she sent me oh God, what's that guy's name? You must know Scott McCloud.
Scott McCloud, yeah, Understanding Comics.
So she sent me, the first book and said, like, read that and make it into that, do that, which I did, and it was incredibly helpful. Like, it was such a great book, just it's like the clarity, of his writing and the way he illustrates everything is just like, it's great, it's perfect. So I kind of used that as my guide, and I looked at other graphic novels, and I thought, okay, like, I reformatted it, and there were no speech bubbles in the first iteration of this, so I kind of figured that part out, and how to pace it, and ended up with what I ended up with. But it did, it was a learning curve, I guess, like literally for me. Yeah.
But I assume you had to redraw a pretty big chunk of it, right? Yeah, because
all of it.
Yeah,
actually, yeah.
All right, just making sure I understood.
Yeah, no, absolutely, all of it. I mean, I used, I had the original. The other thing that I learned at the Center for Creative Studies, they have boxes. There's this great studio. Have you been there to the?
I've never been to there, no, but I'm very aware of it. Yeah,
it's brilliant. I mean, it's an incredible setup, and James Stern, who runs it, just has just a great vision for what it is, for what it should be, or whatever. And so there's this building where everybody works, and in the studio there's boxes of cue cards, of like 4x6 blank cue cards, and basically that's how people work there. Like, they just kind of do. That's each cue card is a panel. Of course, when I started my first iteration of this, each cue card was a page, and then I realized, oh no, these are panels, and then I sort of redid the whole thing using, I stocked up on cue cards and redid the whole thing, sort of thinking of it as panels. So took everything that I had, but I guess kind of figured out how to stretch the action a little bit, so that one page suddenly became like 4 panels, and so it would you kind of break it up, and I think it really helped with when Judy, the agent, told me that, like, just to kind of figure out how to pace the thing like a novel, because the pacing is much different for a novel, a graphic novel, obviously, than a picture book. It's a different language, and so I had to learn this other language.
Yeah, no, it's very much its own language too, both in terms of telling the story from panel to panel, but also how each page works as a unit. Yeah. Right? Like, those are, like, if you write a novel, you never worry about, okay, are these the 200 words that are going to be on page 142? Right? Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But it matters completely how that works on a comics page.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My editor, also incredible, fantastic editor, Andrea Colvin, basically emphasized the importance of the page turn, right? And this is something also that I think that I kind of intuitively understood a little bit about that from picture books. So I had, I don't know, it's like switching from squash to tennis or something. Like, you have sort of the principles of how to hold a racket or whatever. So I think I kind of got that part. But it was, it's key and it's important. And the other thing was, of course, obviously the gutter, like sort of respecting the gutter, which is something that I never really thought about. And in fact, I think in the first panels, the first pages that I had submitted to, not sure to who, to Judy or to Andrea, had no gutter. There were just like boxes, and it was like a grid, drawing, and then it was like, no, you need, and I missed that lesson in the Scott McCloud book, but I had to reread that part to figure out how important that was. And it was,
I mean, I don't think he's even necessarily explicit about the gutter in that fashion, because to me, all of the magic of comics actually happens in the gutter, where you have your juxtaposition of your two different images, and it's the audience that draws the inference between those two things, not you as the cartoonist. My go-to example is always Charles Schultz's where Lucy pulls the football away, and you see Charlie running, and you see the football having been pulled away, and Charlie going flying, but you never see Lucy pull the football. Who pulls the football? The audience pulls the football away.
Yeah. That's
a
great.
I'll do that. I'll do that little speech like when I'm talking to kids, in a classroom setting about comics, and their eyes will go, "Wait, what do you mean that Lucy never pulled the football away? I did it." Like it completely changes the way they think about it. But it's it's something about that language of comics that is not necessarily obvious.
Yeah, it was not obvious to me at the beginning. I really didn't know that. And then, it was explained to me, and I'm not sure if it was Scott or Andrea that explained that it's, that gutter equals time.
Yep.
That's the passage of time. And when I realized that, then I thought, oh, okay, like it makes complete sense, and it's crucial. You need that in there. So yeah, it was a great thing to learn. I mean, I think it helped me a lot.
Yeah.
To figure out how to pace it. Yeah.
Did you do a script first, or did you just start drawing? Like, what were you submitting, either to your agent or to Andrea at that point?
I was submitting. I was like both actually. So I had written everything out. So I had the story and everything drawn. So the shift from the first, actually everything in the first book which is what got us, which was what the agent took to the publisher. It's almost exactly as I submitted it.
Okay.
I mean, not the drawing part. Obviously, the drawing. I redid completely with color, but I submitted ink drawings, very loose pen work, and the text simultaneously, and the text pretty much. There might have been a few tweaks here and there, but it was pretty much as I envisioned it.
And it had so your text had dialogue in there as well.
Everything, yeah. It was all. It was the whole package. And in fact, I had originally thought that it would just be black and white because I thought it, it kind of spoke to the period that it's supposed to be taking place. I just felt it was, it should be pen and ink, maybe wash, and I was quickly dispossessed of that idea. No, it's a kid's book. You need color. And I was slightly resistant, but then I got into it. I thought, yeah, it works just as well because the color, of course, is, the palette is the right palette. Like it's, and it works with the pen and ink, so I think it's fine. But yeah, it was a very, very smooth process for me. And I know. I expected sort of more like, that I'm going to have to make huge editorial changes, but Andrea, being the fantastic editor that she is, kind of just, the kind of changes she makes are just to make my vision more, like, to add clarity to my vision, as opposed to, her vision or the publisher's vision, or, it's my project. And I think, there's a lot of respect for that. So yeah, it was just, I don't know, the most painless makes it sound like it was pleasurable. Let's put it that way. It was really a great pleasure for me to work on.
Well, that's nice. So in that initial package, it was just the first story, just K is Late?
No. The
Oh, the
original
whole
package
thing.
was the whole book that you
All
have.
5 of them. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
all 5 stories, and initially just the agent saw the first one. Like I had sent the first what I had done at Center for Cartoon Studies, so that's what she saw. Then I went back and just got to work and worked on the 5 and submitted that to her, and then she said, that she shopped it around to publishers as it was. Yeah, and yeah.
What was
It was easy.
what was the hardest part for you? Even though you said it was easy, but what was the most difficult part for you adjusting between doing a children's book, which is what you were doing before, where it's again text illustration, to doing a full sequential story?
I think I hadn't really realized how much time this was going to take. I think, I don't, I because I've been doing picture books for so many years, I kind of know how that works. Like I know it's going to be, 4 months doing this, 4 months doing sketches, 4 months doing, pen and ink, 4 months doing color, and I'm done, and I'm out. This was, I didn't really know what to expect, and I think from beginning to end, from the beginning of this book, from the first story, maybe 3 years, maybe closer to 4 years. I had no idea how long it would be. And that, I don't think it was, it wasn't a negative experience. It was just a shock to the system. Like I had never, worked on anything that required that much time. To me, this is like, Cecil B. DeMille working on the 10 Commandments or something. It was, it was an epic amount of labor.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to sound all like misty-eyed, but I kind of loved doing it all. So it wasn't, there's not really any downside to it. I enjoyed it all. I guess I was just surprised by it a little bit. Yeah. But, I'll do it again.
Is there a downside in terms of your ability to output? In other words, like if it takes you a year to do a 32-page children's book versus 4 years to do this, like are you still able to earn enough money in that period to make that worth it? Or
yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's not an issue. That's not really a problem.
You're Canadian. Did you get any government grants or anything like that to help the process along, or?
No, I didn't until very recently, because I am working on a second volume of this, and so I did get a travel grant from I don't know what the equivalent is in the States, maybe the National Endowment for the Arts, but here it's called Canada Council. We have the Canada Council for the Arts. So I did apply for a travel grant to go to Prague, because the book nominally takes place in Prague, even though it's never mentioned. But that's sort of that's what the background's based on.
Sure.
And I had never been there, so I thought, I really should go and just kind of walk around there for a few days and see what that's like. So that's the only assistance I got on that.
I just love the fact that the Canadian government helps artists and pays for artists, because you're right. We do have the National Endowment for the Arts here in America, but I could be wrong, but I don't think anyone's gotten money to do comics in America, right? It's usually finer stuff,
Yeah, but Ben Catcher got a MacArthur grant, for example. Were there any others? I don't know. But I mean, I think the difference between the States and Canada is that there are a lot of other avenues for funding for the arts.
Yeah.
Even, my grant to come down to Vermont to go to CCS, that was from this PJ Library Foundation. And do you know them? Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
It's a private foundation that basically republishes mostly books with Jewish content,
Okay.
and picture books for the most part.
Uh-huh.
And they republish the books, and then they distribute them for free to kids. I think it used to be just in the States, but now I think it's internationally.
Mm-hmm.
And they run all kinds of other funding programs. And I applied for this. I got funding to come down to CCS. They paid for my flight, the accommodation, whatever. I mean, they footed the bill for that. So
Yeah, no,
there's all kinds of things you can apply for. There's not as many in Canada. There are not that many private foundations. So really, everyone applies to Canada Council. And there's local funding bodies as well. Like I live in Toronto, so there's Toronto Arts Council. There's an Ontario Arts Council. But there's less opportunities to access that any kind of funding here. For art and for this kind of work. Like I don't know, not that many.
No, it's rough sometimes. So obviously you've been working on this for 10 years. What was your impetus to do Franz Kafka for kids? It seems like an obvious idea, but it also seems like a really hard idea to pull off well.
What is I guess I don't know if I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. Like I knew that I loved Kafka and I wanted to do something about him, and I thought it would be interesting to. At one point, I thought it would be really interesting to illustrate some of the short stories, which I love. But I thought, that's been done a little bit. Like I know, Crumb did Metamorphosis.
Yep.
I think the Trial. I think he did he not do a version of the Trial?
I don't know. I did a really great.
Yes. So I thought, well, and I'm sure there's others. I know there's others. But I just thought. I don't know. I thought I would. I thought I started thinking about doing something more biographical, and then I thought I will do his childhood, because my thinking was how does somebody become Franz Kafka? Like how do you end up thinking that way, having that kind of worldview? Like what are the events of his childhood that would have led to that
right.
very idiosyncratic, like singular way of viewing the world that we still think of as Kafkaesque, right?
Yep.
It really stands out. So that's what I started thinking about, and that became the sort of beginning point for this book. And I at first thought that it might be just a straight up biography. There is not a ton of autobiographical material about his childhood, but there is some. And then somehow it kind of morphed into what is it about him that I'm attracted to? Like, why am I writing a book about Kafka? Why am I thinking about him so much? And then it morphed into a little bit of my story with his story. So in the book, what you end up getting are little bits of his biographical, true biographical story, like his relationship with his father, which was very difficult. But a lot of that story in the first book is they're events that happened to me. So it was like if it became something like if Kafka had gone to my private Hebrew day school, he would be me. Or if I'd gone to his school, I would be him, or something. It became like this kind of weird hybrid thing. That I really, I didn't. I hadn't planned that. It just ended up kind of going in that direction as I was writing. I felt like I could use that. Like I had these, I thought traumatic, stories when I was going to school. He did as well. We have a lot in common, right? So it just, I don't know, I just kind of sandwiched them all together. And got this, Kafka Gary stew.
Yeah. finding the tone to make it, appropriate for kids, because Kafka's work is really depressing and very adult and very repressive, and so adjusting that tone so that it still works for kids. Can you talk us through that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I can, because you've touched on something, that I think a lot of people, including myself, thought about Kafka, when they think about him, when they read him. When I first started reading him in university, it was presented in using all the words you just said. I remember, the professor who had the very unlikely name of Malcolm Thurlesby, who was he had a plummy English accent, and he wore an ascot, and he talked about, taught us. I think we read the trial in first year university, and he talked about like the concept of anomie, which is a term that was introduced by a early 20th century European philosopher named Emil Durkheim, and it was, it described the Kafka experience, which was this kind of disassociation, this urbanized, kind of paranoid feeling of not being, sort of in line with society, and feeling estranged from, whatever reality. And it was pretty, heavy stuff and heavy going, and it's very dark. And of course, the trial does not end well. And that's the kind of way I read Kafka, and I think that's the way, most people are taught Kafka.
Sure.
Going back to it though, I realized that it was actually hilarious. It was actually very funny. It's absurd. The things that happen in Kafka books, even when they're terrible, are absurd. He just ends up in the most ridiculous situations, and that's the part that I kind of thought, okay, that's the avenue for kids. That it's going to be this kid who, despite all his best intentions, it's just never going to work. He is always going to get in trouble. This is, even though he didn't do anything wrong, he's still doing something wrong. And this is the part that I think, I identify with. It's the absurdity in the actual literature. And I think, I kind of thought, there are probably a lot of kids out there who feel the same way. I think It's kind of a common childhood experience to feel like nobody understands me, nobody gets me. I am not appreciated. I'm being treated unfairly. And I think the best illustration of that for me was when I went to school. We used to, if you misbehaved in class, and this was also like, junior high, you'd get sent to the office, and you would be required to fill out what they called a discipline sheet.
Okay.
This was before you saw the vice principal to, get your whatever was coming to you. And it would be, you get a sheet and a pen, and you have to sit down with the, clipboard, write, reason for being sent to the office. Right? And then you fill it in. And I would always fill in the same thing. I don't know. Which, of course, did not work that well. But that was like, I'm just minding my own business. I didn't do it. And of course, I was a terrible, can I say shit disturber? I
wouldn't, but you just did. So
you can edit it out. I was terrible.
Not on a live stream, you can't.
Oh yeah, sorry. Cover your ears, kids. That's the last bad thing I'll say.
Poop disturber. Come on.
I was a poop disturber. I was not a good student. And of course, there was a reason that I got sent to the office with tremendous frequency, but I still felt it was unfair. I still felt like, how come he didn't get sent? Or, he was, it was always me. it was my reputation. So, that was I think it's reflected in
yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely one of the things that I very much liked about the book, that that a kid can read this and appreciate it on its own and not know anything about Franz Kafka or want to know anything about Franz Kafka, in fact,
Yeah.
and just go along with the kind of craziness of the story. And, yeah, because it is absurd, talking cockroaches are absurd. That's an absurd thing,
It's absurd. Yeah, the whole thing's absurd. He always finds himself in, kind of like, how did this happen? How did I get here? And, I feel like, with the biographical information that I do have about Kafka, that it did kind of describe part of his life, that he always did feel, he wrote an 80-page letter to his father,
right,
in real life, and when he was well into his adult years, into his 30s, outlining all his grievances growing up. And who does that? Like, we all have issues with our parents, at some point feel that we're not being treated fairly, but, we learn how to, communicate and get along and put it behind us, figure it out. He did not, he carried that with him. And the grievances are like, just the level of detail is incredible. And it's published. You can still buy this book. It's called Letter to the Father, or Letter to My Father. And he outlines his father's inability to sort of listen to him and understand him, on his own terms. His teachers, he lists as he's basically saying it's the same story. It's like, nobody listened to me, nobody understands me, nobody, I was mistreated, but not abused. But people didn't treat me the way they should have. Basically, I mean, that's I'm paraphrasing tremendously here, but he felt ill-treated, and it never went away. Right? He carried that with him until the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can absolutely see that. There's kind of this line between Franz Kafka and Willy Wonka that I find very interesting. It's got that same kind of burden of Eastern European something on it, and the world's working against people who have good hearts. And yeah, have you considered that before? Or?
Well, I think that, I mean, you're not the first person who's mentioned Roald Dahl in general. In talking about this book, and I think it's a similar. It's kind of there's a bitter sweetness to Willy Wonka, right? I mean, like, it's kind of menacing in a way, but things also work out okay in a way at the end. Yeah,
maybe
not for everybody.
Yeah, right. I mean, he says they're all fine, but you never see them again.
You never see them again, and it feels like there's this edge, like there's this darkness. So it's I think it's a view that I can say that I share, the same way that I share, this same way that I'm attracted to, say, Edward Gorey, for example, which is like, people didn't know what to do with Edward Gorey also when he started doing his work, because it was dark. It was like, it can't be for kids, it's too dark. But I think, and not every kid will like that, but I think lots of kids do, because I think it really does reflect, like, this is kind of the way the world looks. Like, there are things that I don't understand, and I don't really, that are kind of scary. And I think it's actually good to acknowledge those things, and to kind of understand the world as not being, nothing against Disney, but like, and even in Disney there's darkness, right? Maybe less. I haven't watched it a ton recently, but I think that's part of life, and I think it's okay to bring that into the storytelling. It certainly makes the stories more interesting.
And I absolutely think that kids can handle those themes and appreciate them. Yeah, they're not. Kids are, sometimes people think that kids are just fragile and can't handle anything and should never be challenged, but I don't agree with that. I very much think that you should challenge kids and
Yeah.
show them the bad parts, not in a scary way, not to freak them out, but just, so they're it's like eating dirt or something, right? Like it's okay to eat a little bit of dirt so that you go, oh, dirt's not very good,
Good
maybe I don't
analogy.
want to do that.
Yeah, no, totally. I think there's. I'll have to say, and it's still early days. The book's just been out for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
But there's been reviews, and they've all been I would say like very good, positive. But there's been a couple that I've seen online and that came my way, and one of them was I didn't like it because there was no. How did they put it? Like there was no moral. There's no moral to it, and and he like he never learns, and bad things always happen to him, and it was like,
Right.
well, yeah, that's the story. Like,
I mean, it literally says it on the tin. It says Kay is in trouble. It's not Kay is in trouble, then it all gets better.
Right, exactly, and not every story needs to have a happy ending per se.
Yeah.
I listened to R.L. Stein, the Babysitters Club writer. I just heard him interviewed on public radio in Canada. And he said kind of the same thing. He said, like, people, when the books came out, were complaining that, like things don't end well. Like there's no happy endings. Like, this is terrible. And he said, I'm not writing happy. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in telling good stories, period. I want, they need to be entertaining. Kids need to like them. And it doesn't have to have a moral. In fact, if there's a moral, I'm not writing it. It's not going in. That's not what the purpose is. And I think, I'm kind of with him on that.
Yeah. Speaking of reviews, how did you get the Lemony Snicket pull quote?
I paid him an enormous amount of money. No, I think he has not my editor, but I think her like senior editor worked with him, so she sent him the early version of this, and he loved it, and that was it. I don't exactly know how these things work, but I'm delighted. I was delighted. I was so thrilled to see that. And he was so kind. I mean, he wrote this review, and he actually sent it to my editor and said, I don't know if you have the hardcover.
Just the soft right here.
Can I just one sec?
Sure. Yeah, by all means.
So there's a look. I'm back. No, but he wrote this thing on the hard. There's a hardcover version. It might only be for like libraries and schools.
Okay.
I think that's who it's mostly marketed to. But he wrote, "Kay is my new favorite hero." If you don't mind me reading this, Kay is my new favorite hero, and my new favorite letter of the alphabet. If you like this book, then you are a wonderful person, and if you don't, then something is wrong with you. And he sent it to my editor, and he said with a note that said, "Is this too much? Like, I can redo this." And it was like, "No, this is exactly." First of all, it's exactly what Lemony Snicket would say.
Sure.
And second of all, I think it's perfect. Like, it was perfect. And I did end up getting his email and just sending him a note to thank him. And he just, he just seems like a nice guy. Like he was.
Oh, he is. He very much is. He lives here as
right.
And he's actually been a big supporter of the graphic novel clubs.
Amazing.
Yeah,
well, he just seems like
for years. So
yeah. Oh, he just seems like tremendously generous.
Yep.
With my brief encounter with him, he was just very kind. Yeah.
Yeah. So, very much so. Very much so.
So if you're watching, thank you. Really appreciate it.
So let's talk a little bit about the craft of the book. Based on things that you've been saying so far, I'm assuming that you work pen and ink. You're not a digital guy.
Not really. I worked pen and ink, and I used for color. I used gouache, kind of watered down to the consistency of watercolor.
Yeah.
And then I scan everything myself here and tweak it. So especially stuff like the skin tones. I kind of wanted to make them, because when I'm using gouache, it could end up being a little splotchy, which I think works for material and backgrounds and stuff like that. But in the faces, I want it to be more uniform. So I ended up tweaking all the skin tones in Photoshop. But part of the thing I love about doing this, or picture books, or painting, is I got into this because I love drawing. Like, I really love the feel, like the actual tactile, feel of drawing with the pen and ink. And I don't get the same gratification from doing it on a tablet. I mean, I have a tablet. I use it for the tweaking, but I don't enjoy it as much as drawing. I love drawing.
Yeah.
So that's old school, maybe.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do the color at the beginning, and then I ended up doing various versions of the first few pages, like I used watercolor, gouache, a coloring pencil, because I do love drawing with coloring pencil still. And I did sort of mechanically. I did sort of a straight up Photoshop version, and I sent them around. I sent one version to James Sturm, for example, from CCS. I sent one to a friend that I had met at CCS, Zora Huang. I sent a version to Joe Ullman. I don't know. Do you know Joe? Joe from
Yep.
Yeah. So I did not know him actually at all. I mean, I know his work obviously, but we had never met. And but I really like his work, and I had just read his Fictional Father book, and I just thought he would be a good person to speak to. And they were all like, no, you got to do this by hand. You must. Yeah. It's what you do. And of course my editor, Andrea, and everyone except my wife. My wife somehow liked the mechanical stuff better. I think she thought it was more kind of in line with the way comics, generally look. It was the colors were a bit bolder and flatter, like much flatter. But I just wouldn't. It just wasn't for me. I don't think I would have derived as much pleasure, and I also think it would have taken me 10 times longer, to be honest with you. Like doing stuff, it just takes. I'm just not as comfortable working that way. I just, I have my methods, and I have my. I don't know if you can see my, my paints. I just know how this works, and there's the pleasure factor, and it's huge for me. I mean, I really, I love painting and drawing.
Yeah, the younger generation, I think, tends to use digital more because they've grown up with it, right? And so they're more used to that. But the thing that I always hear from, or that I often hear, not always hear, is that, it lets me change stuff really easy,
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's not like, because when you've physically drawn a page, if something's wrong with that, like, sometimes you have to start over again,
Yeah. And I have, there are many instances of that, but I think, with my technical expertise, which is non-existent, it would take me either way, it would take me time. It doesn't, so that's not really a factor, I think. And I learned through this process how to actually correct things without redrawing panels. I mean, sometimes it just had to be redrawn. Like, just the whole thing was wrong. Like, the lines were all off. The perspective was wrong. Excuse me. But for the most part, I mean, I kind of figured out how to, if there's a mistake, I can change that. I can fix it in Photoshop enough, that I'm comfortable with it. Yeah, the stuff that had to be redrawn would have had to be, like, one way or another. I would have had to redo it and taken, the same amount of time to do it, no matter how I did it. Yeah. So it's not really even a factor for me.
So, do you do thumbnails before you start drawing?
Yeah. I do. I'm still working with the cue cards, so I'm doing
Okay.
it. I'm working out the stories. I mean, initially I'm working out the stories in, like one of these things, right? Just my sketchbook,
Yep.
and just I don't know. I mean, the writing, the drawing, like I'm kind of working like on everything. I don't know,
Yep.
at the same time.
Yep.
And so everything, I guess, starts in the book, and then I'll move from there to kind of pacing it out on cue cards, and then I put that together in a PDF, and then I'll do like sort of more formal, laying everything out on a. I mean, these are all, fit. Actually, well, there's, these are. I don't know if,
Yeah.
I'm doing this the wrong way, but
And zoom in, Ben.
yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm just drawing. Then I'm drawing it in pencil on this this paper and inking it. And making changes as I go along. But yeah, everything kind of starts in those books, and I'll be drawing and writing kind of simultaneously until I kind of figure out what I have, and then I'll just get down to business with the cards. And I have like, I don't know, somewhere in the studio, like there are scattered here and there are thousands of cards now filled with stories that and things changed over time also, which is a great advantage of working with those cards, because you can sort of toss the card aside and fill do a bunch of different ones, and kind of mix and match and change it as you go along without having to kind of change everything. So so it's a bit of a scattered process, I guess. I don't know, but it has some kind of order to it. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Did you work on each story individually, or were you working on kind of the whole book at once?
Yeah, I'm kind of a linear thinker in that way. So I think each story individually. Of course, there are times when you're working on something where another idea will pop into my head, and then I'll just I'll jot it down. Occasionally leave what I'm working on because I feel like there's this really hot kind of thing that I have to get to immediately because it's just there. But for the most part, I'm starting with one story, and then I'm going to the next. I'm working now on I mentioned earlier, like on the second book, and again, like it's I'm working in the same linear fashion, but the stories in the second book are more linked to one another. So I won't tell you much more because it'd be giving away too much. But there's a bit of more of a kind of longer narrative theme to the second book. It's still 5 stories, but there's repeating motifs, narrative motifs. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, these 5 basically all stand alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you feel that? Did you do them in the order in which they're presented, or was it shuffled around?
No, it was that order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel that as you went along in those stories that you were getting more confident with your ability to tell a story sequentially, as opposed to, I mean, obviously you were confident to tell a story because you've done children's books, but it's a different set of muscles, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, I did. I felt, I think the hardest one was to do the second story because, as I had said, like I thought I was done after the first one. So then it was a bit of a kind of a longer process just to kind of, it was more of a kind of, what do you call it when people, kind of sit together and throw ideas at, there was a lot of that. So there was a lot of sitting and what if K does this? What happens if this? So there was, at the beginning of the longer process, there were a lot of notes, more than drawing. There were a lot of just kind of filling up pages with ideas, and then selecting from from brainstorming. That's the word I was looking for. But alone, brainstorming alone in my room here or whatever, walking the dog, and then kind of figuring out which ones had kind of the best narrative potential, and then I would start with drawing, and then I would sort of just flesh those out. So I didn't pick all 4 of the remaining stories at once. They kind of developed over time.
Sure.
But I did end up doing them. The order that they appear in the book is the order that I kind of wrote.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And, did you get faster at the actual execution of pages once you started having some practice doing sequential storytelling?
No.
No, okay.
Not really.
No,
I think it may be in the writing part a little bit, but in the drawing takes as long as I think it's just it takes me a while because I'm constantly kind of changing exactly how things are going to look, and things that make I think like the thing I try to move from picture books to the graphic novel thing was like how much of the story to allow the pictures to tell without having to actually write it, so like I don't need to say this, Kay does not need to say these words. This just I have to let the pictures carry some of the weight in the storytelling. So in picture books, it's a little easier because there's less words, and the pictures really do a lot. Like they have to. So I had to kind of narrow that down to kind of like the micro level. Like, how do I let that happen at a micro level with storytelling, and what the balance should be. Like, how much is too much writing? Like, what's the right amount of writing for this? And, so that that was a bit of a learning curve, and that when you ask about what became easier, I think that is what became a little easier through the process. Like figuring out what needs full, do I have to say these things? Not that I'm against writing. I enjoy writing. I really do. I find pleasure in that as well. But I just don't want to overwrite. I want to make sure that the pictures really do some work, right?
Yeah,
and that they're not just kind of literal, kind of interpretations of what's going on, but that they somehow enhance the text.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. You're doing a sort of separate steps for penciling and then inking, finishing the work.
Yeah. First, I pencil. Well, the initial step, I'll do everything in pencil. Even the cue cards will be in pencil, and then I ink those. And then then after that, I'll do all the final sketches will be in pencil first, and then I ink those. But I do ink directly from the pencils. Like there's not when I do picture books, there is an intermediate step. Like I keep all the pencils, and then I do separate drawings for the picture book. For this, and it's mostly due to the time factor.
Sure.
I mean, there are deadlines in the contract.
And
there just isn't enough time. So I use what I submit as pencils in the editorial process. Those pencils end up becoming the inks, unless I have to change them, and then there are just new pencils that I ink, and then do the color on top of those.
Yeah. The lettering, you're doing the lettering between the pencils and the inks though, or are you doing it early?
Like the lettering, like actually, which part do you mean? Like placing the lettering?
Yeah, exactly. The letters. Yeah.
Well, I just designed the font.
Okay.
But the designer, Megan McLaughlin, does all the typesetting.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't really know how to do that. I mean, that's that's a different skill set. And I thought I knew how to do that. And I was kind of doing that, and then I realized that it was quickly discovered that I had no idea what I was doing. So they took that on. So I actually sent them there was this, who knew? I didn't know you could do this, but there are apps that you can create your own typeface with, your own font with.
Oh, sure.
So
Yep.
you just design it, you upload it, it creates the font. You can, put it into your Photoshop and use it, with your keyboard. Like, who knew? I did not know, but I did that, and then I just sent them the font, the designer the font, and she did all that. She put it all together. There are a few of them that are actually done by hand. Some of the larger, at the beginning, near the beginning of the book, when his mother says no, like that's by hand. I did that by hand. There's a couple of instances of that throughout the book, but for the most part, it's all set at the publisher's end.
Did you draw the balloons though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything is drawn, and in fact, the in the narrative boxes that run across the top of the panel, I thought, like, everything is hand drawn. Like, the boxes are all, the panels are all hand drawn, the bubbles are hand drawn. But I thought, well, I was looking at various examples of graphic novels, and it seemed like all those lines were very those narrative lines were very straight and, like, drawn. And so I discovered how to do that very efficiently in Photoshop. But Andrea, my editor, said, no, that has to be hand drawn. Like, you have to, this is hand drawn. You can't have this, like, perfect line with everything else. It just doesn't look right. And of
Doesn't
course,
look right. Yeah.
It doesn't look right. And of course, she was right. But I just, I thought, well, that's the way it should be. Like, that's the way they all look. But no.
Well, yeah, that's because the people who are professional editors like work to make their line weights fit with the line weight of the other art on the page.
Right.
So,
yeah. So, of course, it was the right call, and so I ended up doing that by hand as well. And,
so, because one of the things that is happening in this book is that your balloons are generally really large.
Yeah.
And in fact, larger than the text needs in a lot of places. Now, sometimes that's to a really good effect that, like if Kay is, looking up at some adult and his words are really, really small and a big thing, that adds to the emotional bit. But were you sure about how much space you were needing, or did you just put in too much space to be safe? If you understand the question.
Yes, the answer is yes. And
okay.
I'm embarrassed to say, but I did. I tried to, because it's my first experience doing
Sure.
it, and I felt, it was the right size for the bubbles. I mean, I think you're right. Sometimes, like, maybe they're too big. Like, I've tried to tighten that up for the second book. Also with the space given for the narrative, text on top. I really, I wasn't quite sure how much space to give at all times. And of course, the designer, who's amazing, did everything she could to kind of make everything fit and look right. But I think that's, let's chalk that up to the learning curve part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was not a criticism, mind you, either. It was an observation on the art.
No, I agree, though. But
process,
for me, it is like, for me, it was like a self-criticism. Like, I did look at it and thought, well, maybe sometimes the bubble could have been smaller. But I still think, it. I don't know. It kind of all worked out, anyways. Like, somehow. I'm happy with the final result, but I think that's a tweak for me, for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like that you are going forward? Obviously, the second book is already in progress, but like, if you were to do another comic, would you still hand off the lettering itself to someone else, or would you try to make that more an integral part of the artwork?
I think I'm more comfortable handing it off at this point. Like, lets me focus on the things that I think I'm good at, and I know that I'm not good at that. Like I don't know anything about kerning or
Yeah.
like I never learned that. I didn't really, I went to art school and didn't really study any design whatsoever. So that's another skill. Like that's to me that's a completely
Sure.
other job, career path.
Yep.
So I prefer if somebody who knows what they're doing does that and just leave me to do my my own thing. Yeah. So the answer is whatever the next book is going to look like. I will not be doing. I'm happy. I love designing the lettering. Like that to
Uh-huh.
me is a lot of fun. So happy to always do that. But yeah, I'll let somebody else
Yep.
who knows what they're doing figure out that part.
There's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just asking a question. Well, very good. I as I said, I really liked this book. I thought, I mean, the kids we've heard back from have said they've liked it.
Nice.
There's a nice quality to this, and as I say, as an adult, being able to appreciate it from the Kafka point of view, just sort of adds another level to it that
Yeah.
I don't think the kids got at all, which is fine.
That's totally. I did go to a kind of like a sales. I met with some retailers in Chicago. The publisher sent me down there to meet with them, and they were great. It was small. It was like 10 people, and we had a dinner, and one gentleman came in from one of the chains, and very nice guy. He kind of reminded me of the coach from Friday Night Lights, and I don't know. He said like he kind of quietly said to me like, I really this book really resonated for me, and I'm like, he just didn't. It didn't seem like he was the audience. Like he was just like a kind of solid Midwestern guy who wouldn't have all this like European, like Central European neuroses to deal with, and it resonated for him, and that really, I don't know, it just made me. I don't want to like stereotype anyone, but it did make me feel like if this guy, if it resonates with him, like that's good. That like I mean I think that there's a piece of this that people can relate to.
Sure. No, absolutely, 100%. And your publisher liked it enough to already have a second one. That they want. Do we know when that's coming out?
Do we? I think no.
No.
I think about a year from now or something like that. But don't quote me. Like don't.
No, I'm not. How far into it are you?
I'm pretty far into it. I'm working on the color now, so I just actually finished the first chapter, the color for that, and that was like the longest chapter. So I'm about, I would say in terms of like volume, maybe a quarter of the way through that now. Yeah,
just the color. You're a quarter of the way through the coloring.
Through the coloring, yeah, and
so the writing and the drawing is complete at this point.
All done. Yeah, that's all done. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. Even though I have to say that because it's somewhat accelerated for the second book, like the process. So I have been making changes even at this point.
Sure.
As I go along, like
of course,
just looking at it and think, oh no, that's all wrong, and I kind of changed. Like I did that with this this color section that I just finished. There was a page that was I thought was wrong. And redid it. So I expect there to be a little more of that, but
as long as you're hitting your deadlines, you can change everything.
Well,
deadline day.
I'm not quite sure I'm hitting my deadlines, but I'm really trying.
Doing my best. Are you allowed to tell us what the title of the second one is?
I'm not, because we haven't landed on one yet.
All good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a bunch of options out there, but I don't have one for you.
Nice. Yeah. And do you have other potential comics in you? Are you thinking about them yet? Or is that just you want to get through K Volume 2 before you even think about it?
I keep thinking that I will be thinking about them, but honestly, this has been so all immersive that I mean, I know that I have others in me. I
Uh-huh.
haven't been even, occasionally I'll jot a note down about something. And I do, as far as K goes, I did, I have a long list of other potential stories, but like for another project, not really, but I'm sure the minute I finish this,
Yeah.
they'll start happening.
And versus doing more children's books versus doing more graphic novels,
Yeah.
like what are you thinking? Are you going to go back to doing some more children's books, or?
I love picture books. I
Mhm.
love doing picture books. So I haven't done one. It's been a couple of years. So I would kind of love to do another one.
Yeah,
Um, and I would like to do maybe a more adult oriented graphic novel as well.
sure.
What that is, I'm not entirely sure, and I cannot say. But I think probably the thing that I'm going to do when I finish the second book is to just take a couple of months and
Sure.
do some thinking.
Yeah.
Hopefully somewhere beautiful, like by the ocean, some ocean somewhere,
Sounds nice.
and just take a little time to think.
Well,
Make
if you
notes.
decide that to be San Francisco, we've got an ocean here. Just let me know. We'll.
Okay, you can set me up with a oceanside.
Well, I don't know if
Dwelling.
I can set you up, but you know,
I will let you know. You will
we,
be the first to know. And I do love San Francisco, so
well, hopefully
yeah,
I'll be the second to know because I would expect your wife wants to know before me. But
yeah, that's probably. Yeah, I think you got a point there. Yeah, don't tell her. Okay, I'm gonna don't tell her I said this.
all right, sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah,
Okay, to kind of wrap it up, I always ask the same last question, same first question, same last question.
yeah.
This is a series of shows. We've been doing them for 9 years now, 2 shows a month. So we're like 250 cartoonists or more that we've interviewed. So a lot of people watch this who want to make their own comics. And one of the things I often hear from people is, I want to make comics, but I'm not sure if I'm good enough. I'm not sure how to start. Just a lot of self-doubt and imposter syndrome that people
Yeah,
get.
yeah,
Uh, if you had a piece of advice for a young person who wanted to make their own comics or even their own children's books,
yeah. Hmm.
what might that piece of advice be? It can be something physical and practical. It can be something
Yeah.
emotional, something spiritual. Any way you want to choose to answer that question.
Well, that's a great question. I think
Try.
two things. Yes, is first of all, keep all your notes. Which is what I have learned from this book. And because there's a lot of notes, and I think I taught at the art school here in Toronto, OCAD,
Yeah.
Ontario College of Art and Design University, I think it's called. And I think the thing that when I was teaching illustration, I think the thing that I kept stressing more than anything, and I think it applies to everything. I think it applies to picture books. I think it applies to graphic novels. I think it applies to pretty much anything you're going to do in this universe. Is have like the idea, the concept is the most important part. I think if you have a solid idea, the drawing will follow, and I think the drawing is in some ways, at least initially, less important because you're going to figure out how to draw. You're going to draw in the style that you draw in, or someone else will draw it, or whatever. But I think without a solid, concept, um, that really has to be your starting point. And I think everything comes from that. So where those come from, where the solid concepts come from, where the great ideas come from, that I can't really explain. That I think is something that requires lots of thinking, and sitting down with a pencil and a paper, and a sketch pad or something, and just you know churning out ideas. And but I think it's when you have the right idea, then you'll know. And
You'll know,
that's
yeah.
what and you follow it. You follow that idea. And that sounds a bit vague, I know, but I do think that is the foundation for every really great everything, for graphic novel, picture book, drawing, whatever. It's all about having the right idea.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
I'll say it for the third time. I liked this book so much. I thought this was really great, and I really want to thank you for taking the time and talking about this with us. Hopefully we will get more people reading it. I mean, we've got 300 members of the club reading it, but we'll keep going with that.
Thank you for inviting me. I love talking about it. It's great. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
There's nothing I like better than talking about making stuff. So that's
same.
That works out. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping here, and we'll come back to you, Gary, in just a second. If you're sitting at home, I'm talking to you sitting there at home. You want to read something. Maybe you don't even know that you want to read a story about Franz Kafka. In fact, you don't even have to know that this is a story about Franz Kafka, but it's kind of dark, but it's kind of funny, and it's just got a lot of energy, and it's got a Middle Eastern European kind of sensibility, and it reminds me of, as I said, a Roald Dahl book. I mean, you'll like this. You're gonna really like K's in Trouble. So there'll be a little URL down there at the bottom or something, and you'll be able to order a copy from us. You can do that, and we would love to sell you one. I also want to say that the next couple of shows we've got coming up, next month's Kids Club the book is Aowulf by Mike Cavallaro. We'll be talking to him in about a month. And then next week, particularly for all you adults out there, it's the Adult Club book is next week. And we are doing Zodiac by Ai Weiwei. And I am doing an interview with Ai Weiwei. You will hear me speak to Ai Weiwei, and then a follow-up interview with his collaborators who helped with the art. We've already recorded that show, so you'll see it next week. That's a pretty cool show that I've got Ai Weiwei. Ask your parents; they'll tell you. And then the Adult Club the month after that will be Bunt by Ngozi Ukazu and Mad Rupert. That's a fun book too. So look forward to all of those shows. I have some thank yous I want to make here. I want to thank Jordan, my producer, for doing all the stuff that you can't see, but it's all behind the stage, but we couldn't have a show without him. So thank you, Jordan. I want to thank Ben here for doing the camera work and running the show while I'm sitting and talking on camera, because I don't want to have to do two things at once. So thank you, Ben. I want to thank my staff. I want to thank Zoe, and I want to thank Kat, and I want to thank Katie, and I want to thank Max. Because if they weren't the best staff that a comic shop could have, I certainly wouldn't have the time and freedom to sit and talk to cartoonists on the internet like this. So thank you. I also want to thank all the members of the club. If it wasn't for you, we couldn't do this. You get a great book every month, and you get these great interviews, and you get cool stuff. So thank you. And then, above all else, I want to thank the creators, because if it weren't for people like Gary Clement right there, hi Gary, we couldn't do this. It would not be possible without you. So thank you, Gary. Thank you, all cartoonists. Really, 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 really appreciate what you do. That's what I got.
Thank you too, Brian. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. All right. Well, as I said, we'll see you all next week for Ai Weiwei. We'll see you in another month for Aowulf. Until then, keep reading more comics, because they're the greatest form of all time. Love you all. See ya. Thank you for watching this episode of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please subscribe and hit that bell up in the top corner. If you enjoyed the books that we're talking about and the creators that we're talking to, every month we pick a brand new book The staff votes on it. It's a program that helps keep our store alive, and we'd love to have you as a member. You'll get a new book every month. Just follow that URL at the bottom of the screen.